Okay, so welcome to another live problem solving exercise. This is number 64 from Hort and Janss's The Best Move, and as 64 is always an important number in the chess world, I'm trying out a new format, some different software to record this, so hopefully it goes well. In this particular problem, we're given a sort of simple prompt compared to some of the problems that we've been dealing with. This position is black to move, and we're asked whether we want to play the move queen to e5 or queen to f5 in this position. So we're not asked to evaluate any other moves, rook to d7, anything like that, just queen to e5 and queen to f5. Possibly one motivation for queen to e5 and queen to f5 in this position is that black is trying to avoid the move queen to c5 or queen to a5. Queen to a5 is obviously critical. It would be mate in 1, so we have this move to watch out for. Okay, so queen to e5 and queen to f5 obviously both defend the pawn on a5. The move queen to e5 also offers a queen exchange, and it seems like the move queen to e5 would cover more of the dark squares, so it's staying in touch with e3 and d4, along which white could possibly check the king on a7. So I don't know if that's a critical idea, but in general I'm a little wary about this diagonal, so queen to e5 controlling more of that diagonal and also threatening the pawn here on g3 makes intuitive sense to me. Of course, it may be completely losing somehow, but it makes intuitive sense. Also, the other thing to note here is that black is currently up 2 pawns, so if he can avoid getting mated by queen take a5 or otherwise ceding a massive advantage, then things should be good for him. Okay, so getting more concrete, after queen to f5, my immediate concern is that queen to h8 might be a winning move. So we've played our queen over to f5, and possibly white can meet us with queen to h8. So it's not going to be possible in that position with the queen on f5 to in any way block the back rank. We don't have a move like rook c8 or anything like that, rook e8. We also don't have any checks, and I guess a key question is rook a8 a real problem for black? Does he absolutely need to stop rook a8, or can he ignore it and play a move like maybe queen to f3? So maybe queen to f5, rook to, or queen to h8, and then queen f3, tapping the rook on d1, something like that. So in that position, I assume that white would play rook to a8 check, and then the king's going to be forced up to b6, and the only follow-up check that white would have would be queen to d4 check, which could be met by pawn to c5, which seems to keep things under control. What else might white have? What if white were to just play, white might have the idea of just playing queen to c3 or queen to b8. And I'm getting a little worried here. I'm starting to think that after queen to h8, we're running into issues as black. So queen to f5, queen to h8, and the ideas of rook to a8 check, and especially I think the follow-up queen to b8 with the idea of queen a7 check looks really, really problematic to me. Okay. So on the other hand, one idea that I'm seeing is after queen to f5, queen to h8, we could meet it by coming along this other diagonal here, and so we could play the move queen to c2, which threatens queen takes the rook on d1, and it stays in control of a lot of squares. And so now white wouldn't have time for rook a8 check and queen to b8. So he might have to play a very passive move like rook to b1, after which I would think that the queen on c2 would be strong enough to keep white's threats under cover. I don't think that there should be a clear move there. Of course, the rook on d1 in the current position is not actually under attack, so it only can come under attack after white plays rook to a8 check, because the rook on d8 defends the rook on d1. I am not certain how to evaluate that position. It's not clear to me that black is getting mated by rook a8 check after the move queen c2, and it's not clear to me that white has another strong continuation instead. Actually, now I'm realizing that I'm missing an obvious move here. In this position, after the queen comes to h8, then this pawn on h5 is loose. And so it's possible for white just to take that pawn on h5 and put the other pawn on a5 under attack, and then the h pawn is free to run. And that can't be appealing for white. It's hard for me to calculate this to the end, but my thought process at this particular point is just that queen to e5 keeps everything under control, and I'm just worried that white has too much going on after queen f5, queen h8, and there's no major advantages for black to playing queen to f5 instead of queen to e5. So queen to e5 offers the queen trade. Since black is 2 pawns up, he has to be happy with the queen trade. I can't see any move for white that really challenges queen to e5. There is an idea of playing rook to d5 that I had not seen before. So there's this idea of throwing the rook to d5, and you can't take with the pawn because this pawn over on a5 is covered. And I had missed this idea, and it's an interesting one here, but black has queen to e1 check. So after queen to e1 check, the queens are going to be traded, and then white hasn't really accomplished anything. I think queen to f5 might lose to rook to d5 though, because after queen to f5, rook to d5, queen to f1 check. No, it's not gonna lose. I was wondering if that would lose because after queen f1 check, king a2, there aren't more checks, but the queen from the square on f1 is going to cover the diagonal by retreating to a6 when it needs to, I believe. So I think black would be able to take on d5 after throwing the check on f1, because the queen could retreat here to a6 and cover the mate. And I don't see another way forward for white there. Because of course I'm wondering about the idea of going queen c5 check instead of queen takes a5, but queen c5 check prevents the king from coming up to a6 because rook a8 would be mate, but pawn to b6 seems like it should always be safe. This pawn should always be able to just slide forward one square, and I don't see a killer follow-up in such a position for white. he might just be able to again go and grab that pawn on h5 in some cases, but not if he sacrificed a rook on d5. So I don't think rook to d5 defeats either queen e5 or queen f5. In both cases, I think that black has enough resources, although he cannot take the rook on d5. And white is momentarily covering that fifth rank so that he's threatening queen take a5 check again. But queen e1 check or queen f1 check both seem to defend against the idea of rook to d5. So I think that the real issue here is that queen f5 allows queen to h8, which gives white counterplay that he doesn't have after queen to e5. So I think queen e5 is just simply the much safer move. I'm not sure if black is losing or if there's a clear refutation to queen f5, but I could always be wrong because the authors have tricked me before. I feel like queen to e5 is just the safest move, and so that's the move that I would go with here. Okay, so this one is a basic but sort of clumsy solve. Queen e5 is right. It's just much safer. The main point is not queen h8, but is rook to d5, which I saw, but I was thinking about in a very clumsy way. First of all, after queen e5, rook to d5 is off the table because you can simply trade queens on c3. So the idea is there, but it's only effective against queen f5. It's not a win for white because queen f1 check does allow defense. So after queen f5, rook 1 to d5 check, rook to d1, the queen can't go back to e5, and so you can take a draw with queen to f5, rook to d5 repeating moves, or you could try queen b5, but now there's a lot of counterplay for white after stuff like queen d4 check and queen to h8. So queen e5 is just the much safer move. Offering the queen trade prevents counterplay with rook to d5, controls all the right squares, and should just be a basic win for black. Patient, but comfortably winning, certainly.